The Colorado winds screamed through the aspen groves as Dr. Elena Rodriguez gripped her 10-year-old son's jacket. They hiked quickly down the mountain trail, racing against the approaching blizzard. Their 2 golden retrievers bounded ahead through the deepening snow, their thick coats already collecting ice crystals. Suddenly, the older retriever, Copper, froze mid-stride. His ears shot forward, nose pointing toward a cluster of boulders. Without hesitation, he bounded toward the rocks, his companion Rusty following close behind. "Mom, look!" Diego called out, pointing to where both dogs had gathered around something dark against the white snow. Elena's breath caught as she approached. There, barely moving in a shallow depression between the rocks, lay a leopard cub no bigger than a house cat. Its rosette-spotted coat was matted with blood, and its amber eyes barely flickered open. The cub's breathing was so shallow Elena had to lean close to see its tiny chest rise and fall. She knelt in the snow, her veterinary training taking over. Around them, she spotted the unmistakable signs of poaching, broken snare wire glinting in the snow, drag marks leading deeper into the wilderness where the mother had likely been taken. This cub, probably only weeks old, had been left to die. Elena knew the rules. As a wildlife veterinarian, she understood that human intervention often caused more harm than good. But with the storm intensifying and temperatures plummeting toward 20 below, this tiny creature had no chance of survival on its own. What surprised her most was her dog's behavior. Instead of showing the aggression she'd expect toward a potential predator, both retrievers lay down beside the cub, their warm bodies forming a protective barrier against the wind. Copper gently nuzzled the cub's head with a tenderness that brought tears to Elena's eyes. Back at their cabin, Elena's husband Marcus, a park ranger, was less than thrilled to see the wild animal in their kitchen. But he quickly shifted into professional mode, helping Elena stabilize the hypothermic cub. They created a makeshift incubator using heated blankets and placed the barely alive creature in a box by the wood stove. "It won't make it through the night," Marcus said quietly, though his voice carried more hope than certainty. Diego named the cub Shadow because of how it seemed to disappear into the darkness between the golden fur of their retrievers. That first night, Elena checked on the cub every 2 hours, expecting each time to find it had passed away peacefully. Instead, dawn revealed something remarkable. Shadow had not only survived but was surrounded by both golden retrievers, who had somehow managed to keep vigil all night. Copper lay with his large body curved protectively around the tiny cub, while Rusty maintained watch from nearby. The blizzard became one of Colorado's worst in decades. Roads remained impassable for weeks, making contact with the division of wildlife impossible. During this isolation, Shadow didn't just survive, it flourished. And then the extraordinary began to unfold. Within 3 weeks, Shadow started exhibiting behaviors that defied everything Elena knew about big cats. The cub didn't move with the fluid, independent grace typical of leopards. Instead, it mimicked the confident, purposeful gait of the golden retrievers. When Copper sat alertly watching the room, Shadow would position itself beside him, copying his exact posture. Elena began documenting these unusual behaviors. Each day brought new revelations. Shadow learned to come when called, virtually impossible for wild cats. It played fetch with Rusty, learned to tug on rope toys, and even attempted to bark, producing strange chittering sounds that were part purr, part growl. As months passed, Shadow developed into a healthy young leopard with extraordinary behavioral adaptations. It woke with the 2 dogs each morning, ate alongside them, and learned to patrol the cabin's perimeter just as Copper had taught it. At night, Shadow slept curled between both retrievers as if they were littermates. The result was a unique creature that combined a leopard's natural instincts, incredible climbing ability, razor-sharp reflexes, and acute senses, with the loyalty and social behaviors of domestic dogs. Shadow was simultaneously wild and tame, feline and canine. Diego recorded videos of Shadow's unusual behaviors and shared them online. The leopard who thinks it's a dog quickly became an internet sensation. Visitors began making pilgrimages to their remote cabin, curious about the remarkable animal they'd heard about. When spring finally arrived and roads reopened, Wildlife Officer Sarah Chun came to investigate reports of an illegally kept leopard. She arrived prepared to confiscate a dangerous wild animal and instead found Shadow responding to its name and playing fetch with 2 golden retrievers. "The law is clear," Officer Chin reminded them, though her voice lacked conviction as she watched Shadow's remarkable behavior. "Keeping wildlife without proper permits is illegal in Colorado." Elena immediately applied for a special wildlife rehabilitation permit. While waiting for approval, Shadow continued developing alongside its canine siblings. Now approaching adolescence, the leopard displayed its species' distinctive spotted coat and powerful build, but its behavior remained a fascinating blend of feline and canine traits. 3 months later, the devastating news arrived. The application was denied. The Division of Wildlife demanded Shadow's immediate surrender for reintroduction into the wild. Diego posted an emotional farewell video that went viral, garnering millions of views and attracting national media attention. Under mounting public pressure, wildlife officials agreed to send a team of experts to evaluate Shadow's unique case before making final arrangements. The assessment team, including a behaviorist, a big cat specialist, and Officer Chin, spent 2 days observing Shadow's interactions with the dogs, humans, and its environment. They documented its unprecedented level of social adaptation. "This is completely outside normal parameters," admitted Dr. Janet Reeves, the lead behaviorist. "But regulations exist for important reasons. This is still a wild predator that belongs in its natural habitat." However, the big cat specialist raised a crucial concern. Shadow was too domesticated to survive in the wild. Rather than placing it in a lifetime captivity facility, they proposed a compromise. Shadow would be relocated to a wilderness area 80 miles from the cabin, fitted with a GPS tracking collar. If it could successfully adapt to wild living, it would remain free. If not, alternative arrangements would be considered. The day of separation arrived too quickly. Diego was inconsolable. Elena prepared a 2-week supply of food, knowing Shadow needed to learn to hunt. Marcus attached the GPS collar with trembling hands, stroking Shadow's spotted fur one final time. The most heartbreaking reaction came from Copper and Rusty. When Shadow was loaded into the transport cage, both dogs whined desperately, trying to block the officers from taking their adopted sibling. Copper planted himself like a statue in front of the vehicle, moving only when Marcus gave a firm command. At the release site, a lush valley with abundant streams and prey, they opened the cage door. Shadow emerged cautiously, testing the unfamiliar scents. It looked toward the dense forest, then back at Elena and Diego with those piercing amber eyes. For a moment, it seemed ready to refuse its freedom. Then a rustling in nearby undergrowth triggered its predatory instincts. Shadow exploded toward the sound with the fluid power of a true big cat, vanishing into the wilderness in seconds. Diego sobbed in his parents' arms as the GPS tracker showed Shadow moving deeper into the mountains. "It'll be okay," Elena whispered, trying to convince herself. "This is where it belongs." But returning to the cabin, they found Copper and Rusty refusing to come inside. Both dogs stationed themselves on the highest ridge, eyes fixed on the distant peaks where Shadow had disappeared. A week after Shadow's release, Diego obsessively monitored the GPS data, tracking every movement. Initially, Shadow appeared to be adapting, moving cautiously through new territory, locating water sources and shelter. At home, both golden retrievers fell into deep depression. They refused food, abandoned their favorite games, and spent endless hours on the ridge, scanning the horizon for any sign of their lost companion. On the 11th night, the GPS data revealed something unexpected. Shadow had stopped at a high mountain pass and remained stationary for nearly 30 hours. Elena feared it was injured or ill. Then, at dawn on the 13th day, Shadow began moving with clear purpose, toward home. Day after day, Shadow's movement pattern became unmistakable. This wasn't random wandering. It was a determined journey homeward, covering ground at a pace that astonished wildlife experts monitoring the situation. Elena calculated the distances. Shadow had traveled over 40 miles in 6 days, moving faster than typical for leopards in unfamiliar territory. "This can't be coincidence," she told Marcus as they studied the tracking data together. "It's finding its way back to us." The GPS revealed the incredible challenges Shadow faced. On day 7, it approached a major river swollen with snowmelt. Most big cats avoid deep water, but Shadow, having learned from water-loving retrievers, found a crossing point and swam across the torrent. On day 9, Shadow faced a busy interstate highway. The tracker showed it hiding in roadside vegetation for 4 hours, then making a lightning-fast dash across during a gap in traffic. Each obstacle Shadow overcame: rivers, highways, urban areas, territories of other predators, left the Rodriguez family speechless. According to everything known about leopard behavior, such long-distance directed travel was virtually impossible. On the 15th night, disaster struck. The GPS signal vanished completely. The last recorded position was a rocky canyon about 25 miles from home. Elena and Diego immediately drove to the location, searching for an entire day and calling Shadow's name. They found only a torn piece of the collar's strap caught on a jagged rock face, suggesting Shadow had struggled to free itself from an obstruction. The following 3 days stretched endlessly. Diego barely left his room. Elena contacted every ranger station and wildlife facility within 200 miles. Marcus studied topographic maps, trying to predict Shadow's possible route. If Shadow had maintained its previous speed and direction, it could reach home within days, assuming it wasn't injured or worse. Its coat provides protection from cold, Elena analyzed, but it needs to find food and avoid larger predators, bears, mountain lions, even humans. With each passing hour, Shadow's chances of survival diminished. On the 3rd evening after losing the signal, as the family sat through a somber dinner, both golden retrievers suddenly leaped up as if struck by lightning. Copper raced to the door barking frantically, with Rusty close behind, their tails wagging with explosive excitement. Marcus threw open the door, his heart hammering. Standing at the edge of their yard in the moonlight was a lean, spotted figure. Shadow, dirty, thinner, without the GPS collar, but unmistakably alive, stared directly at the cabin. Later analysis of partial GPS data and distance calculations revealed that Shadow had crossed at least 80 miles of challenging terrain, including 2 major rivers, 1 interstate highway, several towns, and multiple territories of other large predators. The journey took approximately 18 days for a leopard barely past juvenile stage. Wildlife experts offered various theories: magnetic navigation, exceptional spatial memory, unusual dispersal instincts. But for the Rodriguez family, only one explanation mattered: love. Shadow hadn't returned to a location. It had returned to its family. The moment Shadow saw both golden retrievers, its entire demeanor transformed. It bounded forward with the excited sprint of a dog reuniting with packmates rather than the cautious approach of a wild leopard. All 3 animals collided in a joyful tangle of spotted and golden fur, whining and purring in reunion. Diego ran out sobbing, dropping to his knees beside them. Elena and Marcus followed, hardly daring to believe their eyes. Shadow, a wild leopard, had navigated over 80 miles of unfamiliar terrain in a straight line to return to the only family it had ever known. Inside, Elena immediately examined Shadow. The leopard had lost considerable weight and bore a small wound on its shoulder, likely from breaking free of the collar, but was remarkably healthy after its epic journey. Marcus contacted Officer Chen, who arrived the next morning incredulous at what she witnessed. "This is impossible," she muttered, watching Shadow curled peacefully between both golden retrievers. Leopards don't exhibit this behavior. They don't travel such distances to return to specific locations. And they certainly don't seek out interspecies companionship. Diego knelt beside Shadow, gently stroking its spotted coat. "It doesn't think it's a leopard. It thinks it's part of our family." Officer Chen looked at Elena and Marcus gravely. "I have to report this. They'll want to relocate it again, probably much farther this time." But as Chen watched Shadow's wild amber eyes, filled with unmistakable attachment, she sighed deeply. "I'll propose an alternative. No guarantees, but there's never been a case like this." 3 weeks later, the state wildlife director personally visited the Rodriguez cabin. She observed Shadow's daily routine, playing with Rusty, patrolling with Copper, sleeping peacefully among both dogs. What we're witnessing challenges fundamental assumptions about animal behavior, she admitted. Shadow is no longer a typical leopard, yet it's clearly not a domestic animal either. The unprecedented decision came 6 weeks later. A special research permit would be granted to the Rodriguez family. Shadow could remain, provided it became part of a long-term study on animal behavior and interspecies bonding. The family would construct appropriate facilities, allow regular monitoring, and participate in educational programs. Elena and Marcus agreed immediately. Diego was overjoyed. 2 years later, the Rodriguez cabin had become a unique research station where students and scientists could observe Shadow and its golden retriever siblings. Elena had published groundbreaking research on the case. Diego, now 12, had decided to become an animal behaviorist. Shadow had fully matured into a magnificent leopard, displaying all the wild power and grace of its species. But as it sat alert on a high boulder overlooking their property, maintaining the same vigilant watch as Copper beside it, no one could deny it had found exactly where it belonged. Shadow's extraordinary journey from a dying leopard cub to a unique creature living between two worlds had demonstrated a profound truth. Sometimes love and family bonds can transcend even the strongest natural instincts. Home isn't where you're born, it's where you're loved and where you belong.